Hello and welcome. It's so good to see you. I'm also trying to work out how to go live on Instagram at the same time, but I think I've already failed in that. I just came on saying to Joe, I'm not going to be beaten by tech this week. I'm not going to be beaten. I've been beaten. Damn it. Anyway, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. As you can see, Joe and I are reunited. You wouldn't think that we collaborate on loads of stuff and speak to each other at least once a week, but it's been a hot minute, Joe, hasn't it, since we were online together?
A hot minute. It has. And it's been a long time, actually. It feels like a hot minute, but we're now in what? Nearly end of May, and we were supposed to be kicking off in January. So we've had nearly 6 months off.
I know, it's crazy. And we
Six
have got
months off.
no other excuse other than we've been so busy. And trying to align diaries and get this conversation together has been crazy. So thank you everyone for your patience. As always, we want this to be an interactive session. So come on, drop some comments in, drop some questions for us. It's great to get everyone involved in the conversation. But the reason Joe and I kind of wanted to come back together is because I think it's fair to say, and Joe and I can't even combine the amount of years of recruitment experience that we've got. Mine's like tapping on 30 now, which makes me sound bloody ancient. But I think right now we are facing one of the most challenging job markets since the pandemic. And we've seen the kind of ebbs and flows. We're going to talk about it a little bit more as we kind of crack into this conversation. But we first started this LinkedIn Live series entitled Can Recruitment Crack Inequality? Which is a statement we firmly stand by. Okay, we firmly stand behind, and we absolutely think it can. But today, that conversation, I think, needs to evolve. There is so much uncertainty everywhere. We've got, economic stagnation across the markets. We've got geopolitical tension. We've got this rapid adoption of AI, which I really want to get into today, Joe. And this really increased pressure on businesses to do more with less. So I think it's probably fair to say that, it's understandable that leaders do not know where to focus at the moment, or amidst everything that's going on, how it can position its people to help impact business performance. So that's really why we wanted to bring this conversation to you, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. And that sounded really technical and really intelligent. I've got to follow on.
On Tuesday morning after a bank holiday, my goodness, it's a miracle.
Yeah,
It's a miracle.
I've got to follow on from that, haven't I? I think, yeah, I really get what you're saying. I think that it puts, does it put pressure on us as ED&I practitioners, or does it push us to be even more integrated with the key priorities of commercial businesses? Yeah, which I think it does, and I don't necessarily think that that's kind of like a bad thing. I think that what we have talked about over the years has always felt to me like it was this kind of like it was something that you could take off the shelf and you could plug into your business kind of like willy-nilly, and you might have some results and you might not, but at least you had a go and you ticked a box and you had something to talk about for a hot minute. I like that saying. And I don't think that is, for me, that's not a healthy approach to ED&I. And I think that non-strategic approach and not making it part of the core business mission has just meant that we've seen loads of performative work, and we've seen stuff just lands that's been pretty ineffective and rather expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this pushback on on what we now do for a living is forcing our sector, whatever we are, to really understand the pain points of businesses and what businesses are keeping, what's keeping them awake at night. Yeah. I think there was a lot of telling. We're going to tell you what you should be doing and what's keeping you awake at night because you're not doing it. And I think maybe it's the other way around. We've got a responsibility to understand all those kind of all those, pestle forces, and then really almost interpret that into what we do, and how each of those like component parts of the external world that are impacting businesses, we've got to be really, really smart and think, right, how can I come up with a solution? How can I make things better for that client from an organizational design, development, and strategy perspective? Does that make sense? I feel a bit of a waffle.
No,
I know what I want to say, but
no, and I mean, there's so much there to unpack, and so much of that resonated with me. I mean, we've been holding some, EDI masterminds, including senior strategic heads of masterminds, to bring those in the industry or those in the profession, if you like, together to say, look, how do we reposition ourselves? What I didn't even mention then, I mean, we talk about kind of geopolitical tension, but we didn't talk about and call out the very specific attack on DEI as it stands at the moment. And that has a real impact, not just on the work that those in the profession do, not on the work that we as those supporting the profession do, but actually on customers and staff members of staff. And I think one thing that we've got to be really mindful of, and I think this goes into where we've got this kind of uncertainty in the job market at the moment, as you will well know, Jo, the pendulum swings, okay? There has never been in my career, in my 25 plus years career, a market with loads of jobs and loads of candidates, okay? That market never, ever exists. But it's where that pendulum is swinging as to kind of who it's impacting. At the moment, it's really sad to see that it's actually impacting the employees, okay? They're being laid off in mass. We've got, again, this kind of, very, early adoption of AI and the impact that's having on jobs. We've got businesses who aren't performing as well as they thought they would do post-pandemic, who are then kind of making kind of large-scale layoffs. And that in itself is, I think, a very, very convenient time for there then to be a push back on DEI.
It's a scapegoat, do you not think, though? It seems to be.
I think there's absolutely an element of that, but I think what businesses are relying on is that people can't walk with their feet at the moment. They can't go off and just go and, very easily walk into another role. I appreciate there are some markets out there who are growing, but I think on the whole, it is a very suppressed job market. So what we're seeing is individuals, whether or they do or don't, and often they don't agree with the values of the organisation that they're working on because they have made such public pullbacks in terms of their commitment to DEI, is they actually feel very stuck because they can't then go and move on. So I think, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail in today's session, that when we talk about the commercial impacts and the commercial benefits of having inclusive workplaces, it's when this pendulum swings back, which it will. The pendulum will swing back. We will see mass walkouts.
I think I agree with you. It'll be a little bit, it'll be quite similar to, those organisations that were under real public scrutiny when they laid loads of people off really early doors in COVID and didn't rehire them to put them back on furlough. There was a lot, I think when we kind of when we experienced the bounce back, there was a lot of, I felt like, questions being asked about those. What did your organisation actually do during COVID? How did you treat your people? It was something that people wanted to know, and it was also almost that we'll remember that, we'll chalk that one up, right? Because that shows us as exactly who you are. And I think again, we'll see the same. Those organisations that I think will eventually really regret a very, very public withdrawal of ED&I will have to invest a heck of a lot in their employer brand, You know, when there isn't that control of the job market. It's so depressing as well, isn't it? These organizations that exploit the supply of jobs and the demand for candidates. I mean, I just find it like utterly depressing that there are human beings that will be like, well, we're calling the shots, you know, we've got the power here, so we can basically go off and do whatever we want and not be held accountable by anybody. And I'm like, you might not be being held accountable by anybody right now, but I can guarantee you it will impact you in the future. But I also would like to ask these organizations what I don't think a lot of them making these decisions ever saw the value or ever experienced the value of D&I strategy in the first place. And it's like when you don't feel that something's benefiting your organization, or you're so detached from how the reality of how something's affecting your organization, it's really easy to let it go. So it's like, what went wrong with that ED&I strategy? This might be a really brutal thing for me to ask, but what went wrong? Why the people getting rid of it? How come they didn't see the value of it to their business?
I think there's a couple of things that we can unpack. I think one of them is, you know, and we talk a lot in the profession around what we call cathedral thinking, you know, and you're working on something that you might not even realize the benefit of in your working career. Okay. But the work still needs to be done. The foundations still very much need to be set. What we also saw is lots of organizations, for all of the right reasons, creating D&I functions for the first time. Okay.
Yeah, this is a good point.
Okay, for the first time. But they had to make that move, that they were showing commitment. And I work with so many organizations who downplay what they do in D&I so much, okay, to the point where, I mean, we go in and we audit organizations in terms of where they are, in terms of their DEI maturity. And let's just talk, you know, more broadly. It's not necessarily around DEI, okay? It's been badged and it's been given that name, and we can talk about whether that name should stay. But this is actually about talent management and attraction. It's about retention. It's about developing, you know, talent management when people are in your organization. It's about employee experience. And it's about how can you leverage all of those things to create a culture that drives innovation and business performance. The culture bit is like the end, it's like the byproduct of all this other stuff that kind of goes in. So I think I've completely lost my trail of point. What were we talking about before? I'm going off on a tangent.
No, I was talking about people that are at the top that are making the decisions. Yeah. What they miss? What did they not see?
Right. What we typically see is that those strategies haven't had enough time to embed. Okay.
Oh, mature. Yeah.
Mature. Okay. So we haven't got to the embed. We can see the output now of all this amazing work that we've put in. Okay. That we haven't seen in some cases. In others, there's been too much going on. We do all of this stuff. Okay. But actually some of the things, some of the items, if you like, lack depth. And that's where we're seeing organizations' D&I strategies come under scrutiny. And that's interestingly why they're coming to, you know, I mean, we collaborate on lots of what we would call inclusive recruitment programs, but they're coming to us and saying, we thought we did this, but it's not actually impacting our representation goals. So what we've been able to go in is say, okay, we can see what you've done. This front end stuff is great. But when it comes to hiring manager communities, this is when you can see it's falling off the cliff, because what we haven't done is been able to embed that properly within the business. And so I think sometimes the D&I strategy, less is more. Okay, or an inclusion strategy or a culture strategy, less is more. Let's actually figure out how we as an organization move through that change curve and do it really well, create trust, create buy-in, embed, measure, govern, okay? And let's make sure that that project is, you know, well funded, well resourced, it's got the right level of stakeholder, you know, accountability, etc., etc. And then when we've got that right, and we can go to the business and say, you said, we listened, we did, this is the impact. When we then have the next initiative, we can say, and this is what we've learned, we've done a post-mortem, this is what we've learned works well and what doesn't work well. When we then come up with, initiative number 2, we can say, this is how we're going to run it. And people are ready for the change. They're ready, they want to get involved. And I think just one more point, sorry, Jo, on what you were saying earlier around in terms of that EVP. I think it goes so much and experience in terms of, we may well experience these kind of mass walkouts. What we need to remember is we can only go at the speed of trust. And once we have broken that trust, it's very, very hard to get it back.
I'm not sure whether or not we will see, I know it's just a phrase, but I don't think we'll see walkouts like en masse. I just think we will see this.
Dramatic.
Yeah, no, I think we will. No, I know it's just a figure of speech, but I think we're probably already people, that whole quiet quitting.
Well, yeah.
I think that I know that if I work for an organization that has said, you know what, we're scrapping it. Humanity and accessibility and equity and your experience of my business doesn't matter to me anymore. Right? I know I can't walk out and get another job. So what am I going to do? I'm here. I'm showing up, but my heart's not in it anymore. So I'm going to be primed for a headhunt, right? And the competitor who didn't go down that route, I'm just going to get my ducks in a row, and that's where I'm going, because you've showed me exactly kind of like who you need to be. So I think we're probably already seeing. I think organizations think it's cost cutting. We're going to be, and I think that actually, if you could tie back if you could link up the psychological impact of scrapping decent human policy, right? That D&I is. With the lack of motivation, the lack of commitment, people just switching off and doing the bare minimum. I think like the cost of that in comparison to your D&I budget would be way, way, way more. But I also think this is a learning point. Okay, I don't think we can't just hold business leaders who are scrapping it, to account for it. I think we have we've definitely got a responsibility to this. When we get to go again, what do we need to do differently? Not just in terms of like how we roll out our ED&I strategy, but actually what skill sets do we need? Because it was really interesting what you said before, that, we came back after COVID and everybody needed a D&I lead. And I think organizations looked within their workforce and opened the opportunity out. And because it was the emotion of the moment, maybe, just maybe, some of people who lacked the skills and experience were put in positions to deliver this really, really punchy work. And I sport this right from the beginning, especially like in my line of work. I wanted to work with ED&I leads to help them understand inclusive, accessible and equitable recruitment. And there always seemed to be this lack of, I don't know whether it was interest or whether it was budget and resources, of actual investment in your ED&I people. We hired ED&I people, but what we didn't do is then send them out on professional development programs to make sure they were equipped with strategic ED&I know-how before they took the reins of the business. And there are some incredible people out there, and we know them, but there are also some that I have been like literally jaw on the floor when I understand the level of work that's been done. And I've been like, we have to take a responsibility for that as a profession. That we all rushed out, right, to take up those roles because they meant something for us, without making sure that we had the necessary professional development ourselves. Not everybody, but some people. So I do think that there's got to be that accountability for the level of professionalism and strategic accountability and know-how. Just as you went off and did your your qualifications and your knowledge and know-how to get you into a position where you can strategically support a business with D&I. And before I finish, the other thing that I wanted to mention is, where on earth were the lines of the communication? Why couldn't we get in front of these people to show them exactly what we were doing and the impact that it was having on their business? And I know how difficult that can be for individuals in hierarchical organizations. But for me, if I was going into an ED&I role, I would need a dotted line into that leadership team, or a direct report, a dotted line to the chief exec, or dotted line, whatever it might look like, because I need to be at that top table. Because whatever I'm doing should directly impact the business, and I need everybody to know everything that I'm doing for the organization. So I make my role bomb-proof, right? So they know exactly what I am doing and its impact. And also I'm given a license for not just initiatives, I'm given a license to run organizational change management project, which is, we've talked about this before, haven't we? I need to, as an ED&I person, I need to be a project manager. I might need to be a global project manager. People go to university to learn that stuff, and we get people like having to literally do things like DIY it. I know you're desperate to jump in.
No, I'm not. I forgot the point I was going to jump in on.
You were desperate to jump in.
No, it's fine. I think I sit in lots of rooms with lots of heads of D&I. I don't know why this chat's gone down this route, but I quite like it. And I actually feel quite uncomfortable when I hear they're not equipped, people were put into these roles, and that's the reason that they haven't been successful. It makes me feel uncomfortable because I speak to D&I leads all week, that's what I do for a living. And I think if I was in that role and in that room, and it happened at a big conference that we were all at a couple of weeks ago, it made me feel quite uncomfortable. And I think why it makes me feel uncomfortable is, and I think some of it comes down to what you've just said in terms of resource, in terms of skills development, but I think businesses leaders underestimated the role that they would need to play in order to enable inclusion across the organization. And I have experienced firsthand, and know many who have experienced being gaslit in meetings. They're very happy for you to be the face of DEI externally, but when it actually comes down to fundamentally, and let's take this back to hiring, change the way you hire within an organization to either alter the experiences of those who are underrepresented, or have the balls and the staying power to go, this is going to result in a more inclusive workforce and therefore innovation and therefore business performance. That's a massive link that's missing. And so I think you're right in some respects. Us as a profession, as an industry, need to take accountability, but there also needs to be a level of accountability of an organisation. And actually, do you know what, Jo? If an organisation really doesn't care about this stuff, right, doesn't want to create equity across their organisation, so everyone in the organisation who's doing the same job has the same treatment, has the same rights, and has the same pay. So if that's what they don't want, okay, if they don't want a workforce that either reflects and represents the customer base that they're trying to sell into, or society at large, if they don't want that, and if they don't want to create an environment where everyone can come to work and thrive, and they create a psychologically safe space, so if someone goes, I see a red flag here, this is going to fail because this is a big business risk, or actually our competitors are out there innovating and pushing boundaries, but we're too scared to say that internally. If a business checks out of all of those three things, right, I don't want to work with them. And I'm sure a lot of other people won't. I want to work with the businesses who are really forward thinking, right, who actually put people, their biggest asset, at the center of everything that they do. that empower them to make decisions. They don't get caught up in all this red tape. And actually, from that psychological safe perspective, and I mean, we've both worked for organisations and we haven't felt that, and the impact that has on you on an individual basis. Of course, you're going to get people checking out because they're like that. This is not the place for me. I'm not listened to. My opinion isn't valued. So I think there's a lot of backlash, and I think it'd be very easy to say the D&I professionals weren't skilled enough to be in their roles. I don't think that's
no, I mean, look, I wasn't like putting that label on everybody, but like, we have to be honest, it was an industry that was almost created overnight. Okay, there's been people in ED&I leads for, you know, that I've known for the last 15-20 years, right, and those people are still there, but en masse the ED&I community felt like it was built like overnight. And I'm not putting the blame at those people's feet. I'm just saying there was a real lack of investment in professional development, in equipping those folk with the education and the confidence and the skill set in many cases to take something they were really passionate about and knowledgeable and turn that into a business operation. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying like everybody, but I do think that, you know, and I'm not dragging us down. I'm not critiquing. We know what it's like as ED&I professionals ourselves, and the amount of professional and personal development we've got to put in to be at the top of the game. And I think a lot of us just got thrown into it, given responsibility, high expectations, and then you know, and maybe some of the stuff that we did wasn't as efficient and effective and punchy as it should be. I know stuff that I've done before with organizations that you know, at the time seemed relevant and seemed right, but then in hindsight, and I was like, I could have done it another way, and it could have been, you know, it could have been more impactful.
I think as a profession, I completely agree with that. It's one that has to evolve almost at the speed of light, because everything from a societal perspective externally is changing and moving all of the time. What do you see in terms of the work that we do? Okay, and just for kind of clarity, I mean, we're calling this series the Hiring Wake Up Call, right? I just want to make a point before I kind of ask you this question, is we have not forgotten, people, that there's a war on talent, right? Talent will win the war, as we know, right? The pendulum is swinging slightly the wrong way at the moment, but it will swing back, okay? So the hiring wake-up call, we're calling this, the talent pipeline that you'll wish that you built sooner. Okay, and what we're seeing in the D&I and talent landscape at the moment, Jo, in terms of these kind of massive shifts, in terms of whether that be kind of AI, whether that be the pullback on representation goals. What do you think the biggest risks are and opportunities for leaders in this space right now?
Ooh, okay. I'm just going to talk about this. I mean, there's loads, right? I could, you know, bring out the bag of things to tackle. But I've been having some really interesting conversations with people about this, and it's really expanded my thinking. And I think a big risk is that we are heavily reliant on our Zers and our alphas to almost become a huge part of the solution for the evolution of technology and AI, right? And it's almost like we're looking at our workforce planning strategy. Apparently 70% or something of the jobs that we need filling in by 2030 don't even exist now. They're so technologically advanced, which is rather exciting. But I think too many of us are looking at like that early career space to fill those roles, maybe instead of thinking about the 50+ space. And looking at this, actually, you know, it's not just about like building a pipeline of STEM youngsters, which obviously absolutely is, but what about this emerging gap of unemployed 50+ers who we see, and because of the rate of change, regardless, there are not even just in the 50+, but some roles are becoming obsolete. They're being replaced, right? Or they will be soon replaced. So what are we doing to upskill or reskill the people who are currently within our organization or are hanging out in talent pools that are at risk in other organizations? What kind of hiring strategies and upskilling strategies and education strategies have we got for those big chunks of people? And I talk a lot about 50 plus space because it's, you know, something that's obviously, you know, I'm only a couple of years off 50 myself, and it terrifies me to think that, you know, I might be unemployable because I'm seen as high, you know, as being older or having a lack of skill. And, you know, and I believe it's from a social perspective, it's a real problem that we're going to be facing. A lot of us have had to extend mortgages. A lot of us our savings have been wiped out, if not by COVID, by the cost of living. A lot of us have absolutely no choice but to work until we are 70, because that's when our mortgages are going up, because we've had to extend them and prices have gone up and whatnot. So what an incredible talent pool. So my question is, what are organizations doing in that 50 to 70 space, rather than hoping, you know, that more and more people will go into STEM subjects and we'll be able to, you know, all of a sudden plug in youth to, you know, to help run our businesses?
It does. And I think, you know, to take that one step further, if we talk about inclusion as a commercial business driver, which is always the, you know, the drum I like to beat, is yes, absolutely. How do you embed this in a talent management strategy? So, you know, workforce planning, you know, the what's around the corner, the disruptions that can be coming into your industry, your market, your workplace. But then how do you create an environment where the multi-generations can work together? So how do you use inclusion and culture as a commercial lever to make sure that you've got harmony within those workforces? So again, they're driving business performance through their outputs. And I think it's I was at a this same conference that I was talking about a minute ago. We had a fantastic case study by Diageo and what they're doing as a business to re-engage that 50 plus workforce. You know, what is it that those individuals need? Actually, they need a bit of flexibility, because they might be caring, you know, they might have caring responsibilities outside of work, and that kind of sandwich caring responsibility. So you might be looking after your parents, but you also might want to be looking after kind of grandkids as well. What is it that they need from the workplace? What benefits and policies do they need to make them an engaged and you know, impactful part of the workforce? I think you're right. There is a bigger emphasis on staying in work longer, for longer. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely a huge opportunity.
And also, isn't that a beautiful demonstration of that's a workforce planning strategy, what we've just discussed then. But without D&I, you're never going to be able to make that success within your organization, because you're basically saying we don't do any of that culture stuff anymore. And inclusion, no, that's really 2022. We're not into that either. So we're just going to cross our fingers and hope that it works. So it really demonstrates. I think anybody saying D&I is dead, D&I, whatever acronym you want to slag off, they really, really don't understand that ED&I, D&I has always been within organizations, that, you know, it is the absolute bedrock of, like you say, talent attraction, culture, retention, performance, behavior, values, and ethics, right? It's just that acronym has been demonized, right, by various outspoken individuals and media, and to actually say that it's dead is the most ludicrous thing ever, because without it, any workforce changes that you bring in or any evolution of your business, they're not going to land without the right behavior, ethics, values, mindset, etc.
What did you think how much money it costs organizations to get hiring wrong, right? And to get retention wrong? Why are we talking about that? Why aren't we talking about what is really making organizations fail? And that is the hiring of mediocre individuals, the lack of innovation, the lack of agility. We talk about this kind of change cycle, and we would be lucky if we had one of these things kind of every 5 to 6 years, right? Wow, something's big and it's shaken up the market. I mean, in the UK, I can think in my recruitment career, we had, the financial collapse. We then were feeling everything that was going on in terms of Brexit. Then we had the pandemic. What we're actually seeing is these things are happening more often. And
Yes.
for businesses to be successful, they have to be agile. They need to move quickly. If you think about the insurance industry, which I've done a huge amount of work in over the years, what used to be very kind of traditional institutions with very kind of vast product lines are now seeing, startup fintechs coming and taking a huge part, one of their products off the shelf almost overnight. And then they're left with these huge kind of cost bases, then trying to navigate their way through, staying profitable within a really kind of competitive market. And so what we're seeing in that space, and what we're seeing also in the banking space, which has been happening for the last couple of years, is they're actually rebranding as like insurtech or fintech companies. They're seeing themselves as tech businesses as opposed to financial services businesses, which I think is just fascinating in terms of the impact and the agility that those organizations not only have to have in today's market, but if we talk about sustainable business practice, okay, so many organizations they're focused on the wrong things. And I went to this amazing session a couple of weeks ago around the business psychologist who is a performance coach, works with organizations, but also works with, elite sports people. And actually what he spoke about was the impact of actually coaching yourself and being agile, being able to outperform. You need to have that psychological safety. You need to work within an environment that says,
Of course you do, yeah.
And would you rather, I think I've already repeated myself, but would you rather have those individuals working for you or in one of your competitors?
So what? So yeah, but why is it so? Why do we see so much kind of like disconnection between what like leaders really understanding the importance of what you've just talked about, the psychological safety, and actually the mindset of the people that work for them? Why is there no value placed on that? Like we all know that without human beings, most organizations are not going to last 5 minutes. So why are we not thinking about the thoughts and feelings of people? Those things matter to us on a human level with our family and our friends, but yet when it comes to our workplaces, why are we underestimating the power of how those things impact the profitability and success of our organizations?
Because I don't think that they put the I don't think they put the weight on it. I think they put it down to everything else but that. We are successful because
it's just wild, isn't it?
Wow. But then I don't think, back to the original point I made when we kind of came on today, I don't think business leaders know what they need to do. There is, and I think there's a real shame attached to going, I don't know the answer. I mean, we've both worked in organizations where everyone...
Is it shame or is it ego and arrogance?
Of course it is, but I mean, I wouldn't
we're definitely like Angel and the Devil today, aren't we?
Yeah, I actually quite like it.
Yeah. I was going to ask, all of the things that you were saying that really, really made sense. And I was just laughing to myself, really, just thinking, the workplace is these things that keep happening, politically, economically, tech-wise, all the pestle stuff. Like we've never had so many of those bombs coming. And yet the absolutely hilarious thing is we're still recruiting and rolling out talent attraction strategies like it's the 1970s. And that is the bit that I do not. I think skills-based hiring has never been more significant. The upskilling of hiring managers, you know, it's fundamental, especially with all the challenges that AI is creating, challenges and opportunities. Don't get me wrong, I love AI, but it's giving us challenges and opportunities that we really, really need to overcome in the hiring process. And yet, why are we so resistant to change when it comes to that most critical point of bringing people into our business and assessing whether or not they're going to see us through the next 5 years?
I think there's a couple of things to unpack there. I think resistance to change is, when we're talking about recruitment practices, I don't even want to talk about inclusive recruitment practice. I'm talking about recruitment practices, right? And there's a workshop that we run around kind of building the business case for inclusion within that, you know, and equitable, you know, practices. But there are so many different moving parts, Joe. If you think of like an end-to-end recruitment process, it's vast. There's so many different moving parts. There's so many ways it can kind of, like I said earlier, kind of fall off a cliff and kind of come back on again. And I think our organizations underestimate the change program that they're going to have to take themselves through in order for this to be a success. I don't think that should be a deterrent, by the way, right? Because going back to, you know, the points we've been peppering throughout this, the war on talent, your talent management strategy should be one of the most important things that keeps you afloat and will do for, you know, regardless of how many robots come in and take our jobs, okay, there is going to need to be a human element, and to the point that you've just made, a skill-based human element that are going to need to take businesses forward. So I think that is absolutely one thing. I think there are organizations who underestimate the input, the investment, and the change you're going to have to take them through. On the AI point, I've been to a couple of different conferences on this recently and had some anecdotal case studies discussed. One of them being, it was a conference on social mobility and hiring underrepresented talent for STEM-based roles for a very large engineering firm that we will all know exactly who they are. Okay, so they went to this business specifically to say, we want to target and attract underrepresented talent for a very specific skill set. Okay, role. There were 20 odd engineering roles, and we want some balance. We want some diversity balance in there. So this organization went off and found them this talent, okay, and took them through all the assessments, and the assessments demonstrated that, yes, they were great. They were good to go through. And they said, before we do, let's just pop them through AI. Let's just pop them through that AI in the process. And it rejected all of them. Okay, so that's step number one, right? Right. There's another one, right? Yeah. But I think this is, you know, everyone's jumping up in arms around this kind of, you know, AI talent tech that we've got at the moment. It's not mature enough. The second case study I want to share with you is working for one of the world's, not the UK, it's one of the world's biggest banks, okay, who center candidate experience throughout a recruitment process, which you absolutely should, okay? They had an applicant go through, they were told by the system that they were a 95% match for this job, only to receive an email 10 minutes later rejecting them. So this is, I mean, we see all this uproar, don't we, on LinkedIn. Don't contact the recruitment team. Don't contact the hiring manager. Click to apply. Like, well, hang on a minute. I'm sat there as a candidate with all these skills to offer, wanting to work for your brand, and I'm being told by a robot that I have been rejected, despite 10 minutes ago being told I'm a 95% match. And now I'm not within my rights to reach out to anyone in the company and try and kind of serve that recruitment process. You know, again, you know, 25 years in the industry, that click to apply button has broken the bloody process.
Everything that we've developed to make things quicker and faster and more effective is almost like distancing the space, you know, widening the gap between the employer and the right talent. And let's not forget how, you know, a lot of this recruitment technology, how it's been trained. Some of us are not even asking the right questions, you know, and we're not actually, again, it's like we're bringing recruitment technology without understanding the fundamentals of ethical AI. And there's no, right now, I mean, we're seeing legislation come in, aren't we, like across Europe, especially when it comes to recruitment technology, and I'm sure we'll see things mirrored over here in the UK, but it's almost like it's almost too late. This stuff's embedded, this stuff's been released, and this is already developed hiring habits that are way beyond like our comprehension. There should have been an investment in ethical AI accreditation before we released it out to the world. And I hit like these case studies, they're just like, they're everyday happenings, and then we wonder why we can't hire or we can't find the right talent. And I almost feel, now this might be controversial, I almost feel this is the dawn of going back to how we used to do things. I think I am an absolute believer in, I mean, back in my day, they were called YTSs. I don't know if you're even familiar with the YTS.
Hang on, what does it stand for? What is it?
Youth trainings. Was it youth training scheme?
God,
yeah, YTS.
wow.
And we did that. They were done. You did YTS. It was so, oh my God, it was so gender defined. It's cringe. You did a YTS in hairdressing, right? If you were a woman, a lot of the time, very stereotypical. And then you did your YTSs and things like the building trade, right? So interesting that all of my friends that went in to do the YTSs, the building trade, have gone on to be like property managers and multimillionaires, right? It's really interesting. But I almost feel like, look, we can spend all of this money and all of these resources encouraging people to take these topics at university or college, and then, cross our fingers that with enough prodding and perking, they may choose us as their employer of choice. Or we can almost like go back to, I think there's apprenticeships to me are the perfect solution. There's also a lot of red tape around apprenticeships. There's also barriers within apprenticeship schemes, not everybody can get on them, and they themselves need sorting out. So I think, looking at that, also investing in, people that don't necessarily have the skills and experience right now, but what can we put them through? This is probably more targeted at your 50 pluses, to make sure that we're investing in upskilling, and then we're more likely to retain that talent right through to retirement age. But then also going back to basics with recruitment, and not relying on technology as much. A lot of I was speaking to I went to a roundtable event, and a lot of the people were speaking, the TA leads were speaking about some of the biggest challenges. And it was just, we used to have a challenge where we'd get, 100 CVs through and just 5 of them would be all right. And we'd interview them. Now we get 100 CVs through and 100 of those CVs are getting through the ATS, right? Because it's not just employers that are using the skill, the power of AI. It's also, candidates as well. Exactly. And it's like, where on earth do we start? And the volume, because now it's so easy to apply, they're having real issues with just nothing setting candidates apart.
Yeah.
Mass volume, not even knowing where to start with shortlisting like criteria. And I honestly see this as a movement towards, this is the closest we've ever been to getting rid of the CV, in my opinion, and going back to skills-based hiring, proper, structured process, fair, inclusive, brain-led interviewing, human-led interviewing. And if I had any resources now as a business, what I'd be doing is really focusing on upskilling my TA team and upskilling my hiring manager population, really, really invest in them and making them, the best spotters of talent, the best at giving great candidate experiences. And rather than just kind of relying on machines to do all the graft, because I just don't think, I think it's,
I think you're right. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better in terms of, you've got a AI generating a job spec that
Yes.
then AI generating a CV. So you're right. I mean, I was speaking to a client a couple of weeks ago that had 750 applicants for one job.
Yeah.
Right. This is So how does someone in TA even start?
Impossible job.
It's impossible. It's an impossible job. I also think that in terms of this kind of upskilling piece and in terms of the screening element, what we are going to be screening for is you're not going into a job for life anymore, right? You're going in to solve a problem for, let's say, a period of time of 18 months to 2 years before the next disruptor comes into the market and the next one and the next one. So it's going to be around adaptability, agility, ability to move and change with the times, that kind of that change management skill that we think that we're potentially lacking is actually going to become commonplace in terms of like, this is the skill, that project management, pushing things through, fail, try, that post-mortem, we go again. That's actually the skill that we're going to need, as opposed to a ready, a ready-made kind of qualification. Do you know what I mean? You need, I mean, I was joking about the tech earlier, right? I know in order to remain current and relevant and be able to like spread all this stuff all over online, I need to learn how to like connect this to Instagram and go live at the same time. I'm gonna crack it next time.
And then there'll be something else. There'll be something else that you've got. It'll all be different.
Exactly that. By the time I've cracked it, I'll be onto something else. But there is something I just wanted to make the point, and then I'm going to ask you a final question. Is there is so much noise in terms of what's going on in the US at the moment. I think it's really important for UK and European businesses to remain vigilant. I mean, we've got, disability and race ethnicity reporting coming into the UK very, very soon. Europe is forging forward with inclusion, diversity, culture, whatever it is you want to call it. And so going back to the question I asked you in terms of what are the biggest opportunities and what are the biggest risks for leaders in this space right now, I think the biggest risk we've got is standing still and doing nothing. Okay. Seriously, if we stagnate and wait for someone else to make a move before we do, we're already too late. It's already too late. And I think really the opportunity for organisation and at D&I level, strategic heads of, is to create the commercial link ASAP with its people. Okay, what is the commercial link of the people, and how can we then create environments that uses and realizes the benefits of inclusion that is backed up by equitable processes, which then the outcome is getting underrepresented talent in the business. So I think for me, that's the biggest opportunity. And also, on that, take control of the narrative. Stop waiting for someone else to tell you what you need to do. Go out there and take control, basically, of your own future. So that's one thing. Hang on, let's talk about one last question I want to. Okay, I'm going to do the magic wand question. Okay. If you had a
magic wand question.
Well, if you had a magic wand.
Right.
One mindset shift you would want to see across hiring teams this year?
I mean, look, this is going to sound like a blatant plug. It would do. I think that it would be like to not underestimate the power of education and training. And actually, you're being asked to do things differently. You are propping up your organization's talent pipeline, right? You have a massive responsibility. And yet, are you being resourced? Are you being developed? Are you being asked to do things in a different way, but not being trained to do things in a different way? And I do think that what I'd like is for us to understand that just because we want it to happen doesn't mean that with all that will and all those initiatives that support that will, when we haven't really audited and reworked how we hire in our recruitment marketing, we're never gonna we're not gonna see any change, because that I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just think like recruitment processes need to change massively, but we need to be able to understand that the education and the knowledge and the know-how helps us to change them. And I think you said something before, and and we get it all the time. It's like, what is the biggest blocker to change? It's just like having the energy and the time to do something, isn't it? And I would like to see this like fundamental shift in acceptance, that actually we've become like really complacent, and that we need to see a fundamental change in what we actually do, and really commit to it. And just because it's hard doesn't mean to say it shouldn't be done. That's a big old answer to the magic wand question.
I like it. Should we do
What
this
about
again?
you?
What's
What's yours?
I think let's put let's just for a laugh, right? Just to have a bit of fun, let's put candidate experience front and center of everything we do, right? Just for a laugh, and let's see what happens.
Imagine that.
Can you imagine?
I mean,
can you imagine? Can I tell you what would happen, right? There wouldn't be loads of candidates and loads of processes, right? There wouldn't be this we wouldn't have this like weird click to apply where everyone thinks that they can do every single job that's out there on the internet, right? That would solve the problem of then, really talented talent acquisition people having to go and sift through hundreds and hundreds of applications, right? Recruitment processes would be quicker because people would be more engaged. Candidates would be more likely to say yes to jobs, right? So you wouldn't have to go round. I mean, some of the jobs that we work are like they've been out the market like 3 times by the time we get there, and we're like, okay, let's do this properly, and then you'll get the result you want. So let's just treat people like human beings, understand what needs they need, what if they've got any additional support that they need to get them through the recruitment process. Let's set them up to succeed. Let's not set them up to fail. Let's set them up to succeed and come in and demonstrate exactly what they're capable of, right? Just do that for a laugh and see what happens.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. Right, let's do this again. I've really enjoyed it. I'm liking the energy we're both bringing this on a Tuesday morning.
And I think it would be really good for people to tell us like what they want us to talk about.
What are they us wang on about?
What sorry?
I said, what do they want to hear us wang on about?
I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, what is it can be as spicy as you want it to be. What should we? And I quite like the different dynamic with like, us having a different opinion on stuff. Yeah. Or not a different opinion, different take, a different perspective.
And on that, just really quickly, and I'm going to wrap up, you mentioned earlier about the kind of upskilling of, and, what questions are these, is AI asking, et cetera, and what value do D&I professionals bring to this space, and what's the impact of businesses not having these leads internally, right? It's our job to challenge and question. We haven't got all the answers, but it's our job to go, let's just take a step back a minute. What impact could this have? Or what impact is our current process having? Who is it excluding? That's our job. Our job is to advocate for and to see the gaps. So if you remove that as a resource, okay, if you remove that as a skill set and don't upskill the people that you've got in your organizations to spot those gaps and to spot those risks, it's going to have a bigger impact. I'm going to leave it there. Because, we both could talk about this forever and a day, which we love to do. I've really enjoyed it. I love you. I love working with you. I love the fact that we get to collaborate and bring this to life for our clients. I'm grateful for the clients that we work with. I really am, because they get it and they get as excited about this stuff as we do. And so I'm grateful for you. Thank you for everything.
And you. And we ain't going anywhere.
We haven't got started yet. This is it. This is the new era.
I feel like we need like a bit of Elton John, like still standing music. That's like my theme tune.
Would you know what? I actually went to fancy dress party on Saturday night dressed as Elton John. I'm going to send you a photo. I'm going to put it online. And that was the song that kept going all night. I'm still standing. We're still standing. We're not going anywhere.
I know. My theme tune to life.
I love it. Right, have a great week.
All right then.
And to everyone else, thanks for joining us. The chat has been going wild. So thank you so much for all getting involved. We'll be back next month for more of the same. So appreciate you all. Have a great week. Have a great day. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye.